All right. Well, first question would be, why have you decided to run?
Yes, ma'am. So I'm running for the United States Senate here in Kentucky, where I live, because I'm very fortunate and lucky to have overcome the circumstances that I was raised in. And I believe that the opportunities that I had to do that should be available to all Kentuckians, all Americans, and everybody in the world. Um, so right now I'm an attorney. So I'm a workers' rights and a civil rights attorney. So if someone is mistreated at work, if their constitutional rights or state, local, federal rights are violated by their employer, I will step in and I will file the lawsuit and argue on their behalf. Before that, I was a special agent in the United States Secret Service. So I was one of the guys that whenever the president, the vice president, or their family went anywhere on American soil or elsewhere, I was one of those guys with the earpiece that just tried to look really tough to make sure that no one tried to hurt him. And I did that for a few years. But if you go really far back to how I grew up in rural Western Kentucky, I grew up in a very small town and I was raised by a single mother. Our father left when I was very young, when I was three, and she did everything she could to help us out, but that oftentimes wasn't enough. So, unfortunately, here in America, we like to say that there's this thing called the American dream, and there used to be. Back,
Yeah,
50, 70 years ago, a person could, with no education, no training, they could go get a job, get trained on that job, and with one income, they could take care of their whole family. Well, that hasn't been the case for many, many years now. And 30 some odd years ago when I was young and growing up, my mom worked 100 hours a week and we still didn't have enough money. Like we would still be homeless at times. We still didn't have food. We didn't have the basic necessities, despite her working more than any person ever should have to. And, I grew up and we had Medicaid, which is health insurance that's provided by the
yeah,
government. We had food stamps, which is food assistance. And I don't vilify, I don't think people who need those services are bad people. I don't think they're lazy people. My mom surely wasn't lazy. I got my first job, when I was 7 years old. I stripped tobacco at a farm. We weren't lazy by definition. We were always doing something, and we still couldn't get ahead. So I'm running because currently, right now in American politics, unfortunately, we have President Donald Trump. And unfortunately, there's a lot of
yeah,
people in our Congress who agree with everything he does. And those people, they look down on people like my family, my mother, my siblings, and I. And they see us as, or they saw us as leeches, as people who just took more than they ever gave into the system. And they are seeking now to do away with all of our safety net programs to ensure that people who are having a hard time have it even harder. And they also are stripping away workers' rights. So even if you're not
yeah,
reliant on these safety net programs, it's now becoming harder and harder in America to work one job, to pay your bills, to have basic benefits like insurance and a retirement. All that's going away. And I don't think that's right. I benefited from the safety net programs growing up. I put in a whole lot of hard work to overcome my circumstances, but I also got incredibly lucky.
yeah,
That's the one thing you can't recreate, no matter how hard you try. And it would be hypocritical. It would be terrible for someone like me who benefited so much from a system to not use their experiences, their education, their skills to defend the same systems that are under attack when other people need them. And that's the long and short of why I'm currently running for this seat.
great. Which issues do you want to prioritize? You mentioned some, but
Mhm.
on the whole,
Yeah, so we have to address the affordability issue in America first and
yeah,
foremost, or else we're going to see a domino effect of just terrible things. So in Kentucky, I don't know what it's like where you are now. Where you are, do you have like a minimum wage that's set by law that people have to be paid?
yeah, yeah.
Now, is that enough for someone to live on, or how does it work where you are?
Well, now, rent prices are going very high, prices are high, so yeah, it's getting complicated, but in the past, I'd say that it was enough. Right now,
Okay.
it's becoming more difficult for, especially for younger people, you know.
Yeah. Now, do you know, and you might not know, which is fine. I didn't mean to quiz you. Do you know the last time it was raised where you are?
I think it was last year or maybe this year, because I don't really follow
Hmm.
the the parliamentary sessions, but I know that it was, a couple of years ago, or maybe this year.
Okay. So in America, it was almost 20 years ago. And in Kentucky, where I live, and that's a problem, right? Like, even if you don't follow it where you are, you should know that inflation over the past almost 20 years has been ridiculous, especially since COVID. Grocery prices since the start of COVID in 2020 to today are 30% higher than they were before COVID started. And before
Yeah,
COVID, we would see about, at worst case scenario, a 2% increase a year on grocery prices. And so there's no rules anymore to how inflation works. It's all skyrocketing. And I live in a country that so many people here say we're the best country on earth. We do all these things right, but we do so many things wrong. And I agree that we could be, one of the better countries on earth, but we don't treat ourselves and we don't treat other countries good enough to have that title right now. So I'm not going to argue that America is the best country on earth. We're the best at failing in many ways that we shouldn't be failing in. And
yeah,
that gives me to this affordability thing. So one of the first things I want to do is reevaluate how we set our minimum wage. And our minimum wage is completely arbitrary. It's not based, it was based on the federal poverty lines back in the day, and to keep a family above that. But the federal poverty line is an arbitrary calculation over here. It doesn't really account for what does it cost to live. It has nothing to do with the cost of living. So right now in Kentucky, if you were to come over here and you were to get an hourly paid job, companies, whether it's a private company or a government agency, they could pay you $7.25 an hour. So if you work 40 hours a week and you save every penny that you earn, you're going to be taking home about a little over $1,200 a month on that. Well, in Kentucky, the average rent or mortgage payment is $1,600 a month. So even working minimum wage, saving every penny you have, not
yeah,
even paying your taxes, you're $400 short. So that's a huge problem that we haven't addressed in 20 years. So I want to change the minimum wage to a living wage standard. I believe that if you work a job, you should be able to pay for your cost of living no matter what city you live in. And I
yeah,
believe that one income should be able to take care of a family. So that two income households here are doing pretty damn well. I don't think people should work to barely survive or work to struggle. I want to deal with that. In America right now, we have an issue with private residences, homes being purchased by corporations and special
yeah,
interests. I don't know if you guys have that going on.
yeah,
And
just the same.
yeah, and it's a nightmare, right?
It's
I don't
yeah.
know. Now, are you fortunate? Do you own your own home by chance? Do you rent? What's your situation?
Well, I can't rent right now, and I can't have my independent home. It's very,
Mhm.
it's very expensive here,
Yeah,
especially in
and
the
that's
coast. I live by the coast, so
okay.
we have a lot of tourism, and it's
Hmm.
super high.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that that's happened to you. And I just don't think that's right. I think that you're working right now.
Yeah.
You're literally doing your job, talking to me. And I think anybody
Yeah.
who works, you should be
Yeah.
able to have that dream fulfilled. Um, at least in America, most of the time, the only way a family can build any kind of wealth that passes down to the next generation, their children or grandchildren, and
Yeah.
most of the time that's in property because it takes every dollar you have to stay alive. And we have a terrible healthcare system over here to where you can work and you can amass a pretty decent savings for retirement, but then you get cancer and it's all gone. We allow people to lose everything they've worked for their whole life because they got sick.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that's a freaking nightmare. And I don't know why people haven't revolted over here before this time. So I want to, again, I know I talk a lot, but to summarize everything, I want to change the minimum wage to a living wage standard, one that automatically adjusts at the rate of inflation every year that Congress doesn't have to vote on. I want to ensure that individuals, not private corporations and special interests can and private equity can buy homes. And I want to ensure change our healthcare system. I'm a Medicare for all kind of person. I believe
Yeah,
that the government should control healthcare. I don't think that healthcare should be a private business where you make profit when someone gets sick. I think that's disgustingly evil, and we
yeah.
should move away from that. But those are the big ones. But there's a million things, but I don't want to make you work overtime. So,
No, no worries. I really like to talk. So,
okay.
well, you mentioned cost of living priorities, of course, with housing, the economy, and healthcare. I'm really interested about the healthcare system, and how do you plan to reform it, and the policies that you would like to see implemented on that issue.
Yeah. So where you're at, do y'all have do you have private healthcare or is it a public system?
It's a public system, but we do have some, we do have some people who can you can have a health insurance, private health insurance, but it's we have the public services, like
Okay.
the 99% of the population uses the public service.
Yeah. And that's what I want for here. And it's something that we can do here. We have a lot of people in office who are very greedy and selfish. And one issue with our country is I'm running for Senate right now.
Yeah,
Right now, if I win and I become a senator, one of 100 people only, I can sit on the boards of private hospitals and make money that way. I can own stocks and shares of private corporations, including healthcare corporations, including um, like pharmacological research companies. I can make it so that I personally benefit off of a private healthcare industry that is harder and less accessible for most Americans, but it's better for me. And I can hold office, I can make decisions, I can impact the law as someone who directly benefits from a broken system. And almost
yeah,
everybody in our government benefits that way. And it's a nightmare. So we have to completely outlaw any kind of private interest stakes by members of Congress or any elected or appointed official. And then we get to a system kind of like what you have. Ideally, I would want Medicare for all. Medicare is our state sponsored insurance, and so is Medicaid, the two different qualifiers for that. I think that we just have one system that you pay a little bit more in taxes for, but then you get access to whatever providers and treatment that you need. Um, People on the other side don't agree with me. It's funny, they
yeah,
say that they are the party of like family values and of old school like Christian biblical values. And I think,
yeah,
I was raised in a Southern Baptist church here in Kentucky, and I was read the stories about Jesus healing the sick and helping the lame to walk again, and he didn't ask for a copay, right? But people on the other side, they it's funny, they claim to want what he would have preached, but then they do everything they can to ensure that sick people can't get healthy here. It's just a
yeah.
hypocritical system we're in. So, of course, I want Medicare for all. I don't know if that's going to be possible, at least in a first term as a senator, but we can do a public option, which sounds similar to what you described, to where the individual citizens over here will have a choice. You can either pay into Medicare and receive that, or you can elect not to pay in, and then you can go get a private insurance. And that is the option that we give to the public. And it's a nice hybrid to get us eventually to a Medicare for all system. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, we have allowed our healthcare industry to just completely run afoul of anything that is moral, anything that can be considered a decent thing to do. So there is a lot that we're going to have to break down and a lot that we are going to have to get under control. And it's going to take a very long time.
Okay. Well, moving on to civil liberties, what are your views on that issue?
Yeah, I mean, do you have one like anything in particular you want to ask about? Because I don't want to
Yeah, well, of course,
talk for an hour.
voting rights,
Hmm.
civil rights,
Hmm.
immigration policies,
Okay.
all these types of
Yeah. So
issues.
so
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, it's
Everything.
yeah, that's what I thought. I didn't want to do another long-winded answer if there was one thing in particular, but I am shocked that I am only one of about half of the country that stands up for people's civil rights and basic rights. Our government over here right now, our president and his party, they're trying to push something called the SAVE Act through, and that they claim is
Yeah,
to reduce voting fraud. But there's no the amount of voting fraud that happens is so insignificant that it's never been proven to have swayed an election one way or the other.
yeah,
And the last few years, almost 99% of all voting fraud has happened by the Republican Party, the one who's trying to stop voting fraud. So it's this weird reality they've cooked up in their head that is completely detached from what's actually happening.
yeah,
Um, but the SAVE Act, what it does over here, it makes it harder for poorer people and a large part of the population, including women who've been married and changed their last name, and just makes it harder for these people to vote. And coincidentally, these people who it's going to be harder to vote now, they more times than not align with Democratic Party values, which is the party that I'm running on.
yeah,
So they're going to require, instead of a driver's license, which is what's required in most states right now, if not all to vote, they want you to have a passport or like an original copy of your birth certificate. And at least over here, there's so many people who don't have that. America's so big, a lot of people can't travel out of it. They just don't have the means to
yeah,
do that. So, and you don't need a passport to go from state to state here. You have the freedom to travel as an American citizen. So a lot of people don't have these documents, and it essentially is just putting a burden on one of the most foundational rights that it means to be an American, which is the right to vote, the right to be a part of our democracy,
yeah,
quite literally one of the founding principles of our country. And I think anybody who is fighting or who is doing anything to restrict that right, I think they're un-American, they're undemocratic, and they don't care about the basic rights of people. Now, immigration right now is a very big thing happening in America,
yeah,
and unlike some people in the Democratic Party, I will admit we do have a lot of issues in terms of people coming into our country without going through the proper channels. And you need to be able to monitor this and control this. Any country needs to, even if you just don't look at it from like a societal, like personal preference point of view based on who's here, but like a health point of view. If someone's coming over and they have a contagious disease, they would be screened and that would be caught in the normal
yeah,
process. Coming over without going through that allows that to run afoul here. And so there are needs and there are reasons to have a real immigration system. So we have to do that. But our current administration, they ran on all these things that they're going to fix the system, they're going to do all this. But when it came time to hiring more immigration judges, more attorneys, more officers and agents to help expedite that process, to help clear up all the numbers of people that are in there, they said there was no money for that. But then they turned around and they allocated hundreds of millions of dollars a month to push more ICE agents through training who are now in a ton of American cities shooting American
yeah,
citizens, killing them. Um, they are also detaining and deporting people who have legal status here. They are
yeah,
they're running amok of everyone's constitutional rights, and it's absolutely insane. So almost everybody running on the Democratic side is saying that the ICE agency needs to be abolished. It needs to be rebuilt because they do have a purpose, but that purpose is on our borders and on all of the ports of entry, not in random cities, not knocking on people's doors, not shooting people in the streets. So we need to get them under control, probably build up a whole new system. I think that we need to hire those new judges, hire the new attorneys, the new officers and agents to make sure that our system is one that can keep up with the number of applications and
yeah,
petitions we're getting. And I just think we treat people like human beings. Even if you're here illegally, that doesn't mean you send a SWAT team and put a shotgun in somebody's face and threaten to kill them if they,
yeah.
push back a little bit.
There's due process.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
thank you for knowing that. Because here, so many Americans, so many people, I'm going and I'm talking to people, they don't think that non-citizens have due process in America. So if you came to America, like to do reporting or to do anything, maybe just a vacation, if you were ever accused of any wrongdoing, you just by being on American soil, you are guaranteed protections under our Constitution. You don't have to be a citizen. You don't have to have any kind of certain status. You can just be a visitor. Whether you were here lawfully or not, the Constitution is set up
Yeah.
with that in mind because our founding fathers, they came from many different backgrounds and countries that did not provide protections to people who weren't citizens. And they saw that as
Yeah.
something that was wrong. So again, I am much more in favor and in line of thinking with how our founding fathers were. I believe you treat people like they're people. You don't, hoard them all together and then deport them to a country they have no connections to. That's another insane thing that our administration is doing. Um, and there's a way to fix our immigration by and still keep our humanity, and that's what I advocate for on this. Now, in terms of civil rights, this is again, it's 2026, and I'm an attorney, and I'm a workers' rights and a civil rights attorney. So, it is shocking that I have to say that women should have the right to choose their medical care that they receive. They should have full body
Yeah.
autonomy. Not only because I was raised by a single mom, so I'm partial, not only because I'm married to a woman, not only because I have a daughter who's 10. All those are true, and all those definitely make me want to fight to ensure that they are treated the same as I'm treated, if not better. Um,
Yeah.
but again, I don't understand the thinking and the logic to do away with the rights, even if you don't know any women. Such
Yeah.
a bizarre, a dumb thing that so many of our people over here try to do. Um, Also, we are now seeing the stripping down and the breaking down of a lot of our DEI programs.
Yeah.
Um, and unfortunately, in America, hopefully your public information system is better than ours because we have people running for this seat on the other side. We have current members of Congress and the Trump administration. They'll put out statements and videos pretty much saying that DEI, anything DEI, is attack on white people, which is an insanely stupid thing to say. But
Yeah.
half of the country over here believes it because they believe whatever certain people tell them. So unfortunately, again, it's 2026. I shouldn't be having to relitigate and fight these issues, but I stand up for all of the DEI initiatives that have been stripped away. I want to reincorporate those. I want to make sure that people who are not given a fair shot, have a fair shot. And this
Yeah.
goes back to my story because I've had so many people argue with me in Kentucky and elsewhere, saying, that I didn't have white privilege because I grew up in poverty. I was homeless a lot of the times. We had to work, we had to do a lot of things to barely scrape by. So they say that my story alone should prove to me that it doesn't exist. Well, the problem is like I might not have had as much privilege as other people, but just by being a white guy in America, I know for a fact that I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you as an attorney, as someone who was a federal agent, even though I grew up in that situation, if I wasn't a white guy. I know that there were opportunities given to me because my name is a traditionally white name over here. Because when I meet with people and talk to them, they are more comfortable being around me than other people because of their biases. Um,
Yeah.
and I know that exists. You have to be ignorant and you have to be lying to yourself to say that doesn't exist. So yeah, like even though some days were really hard and I could not have pointed out the privilege that I had in that moment, I know that I have. I know that that does exist, and I know that these DEI programs and initiatives are just trying to make it a more level playing field for people who aren't born a white guy. And I don't see anything wrong with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I know that, in places like Kentucky, Alabama, and other states, you had like, this white nationalist groups like the KKK and other groups that, in the 1960s and the 1970s were attacking
Yeah.
um, Black communities. So yeah, it's
Hmm.
it's very, the historical background of that, it's very let's say, horrible because
Yeah.
of that.
Well, it's horrible. It's real. It happened, and
Yeah.
it has lasting impacts to today. And that's because most of the white nationalists, most of the people who were in the KKK or other hate groups, those weren't just random people who didn't have influence. That was your
Yeah.
judges, that was your bankers, that was your members of Congress back in the day. They wore a hood for a reason, right? They were prominent members
Yeah.
who helped develop the the foundations of all the systems that we still use today. That's why there is such a thing as, privilege, and that's why, minority individuals are affected negatively because the foundation, the systems that were built by those people inherently are skewed in favor of a white person because
Yeah.
that's what they wanted. And the way you can prove that in America is if you can go to a bank, for instance, and you can somehow pinpoint all of the people who are racist to any degree, even if they just have a tiny bit of bias in them, but they don't show it. And you could eliminate those people, and then you could put people with no biases at all in those situations. The amount of approvals for non-white people to get like loans or to get lines of credit wouldn't change. It wouldn't go up because the system was developed on these
Yeah.
broken ideologies, and therefore the approval ratings and the circumstances that dictate whether someone gets approved. So, let's say a black family coming in for a loan for a home, they are subject to the circumstances that have existed due to our past and what was set up before
Yeah.
them. So they have no control over it. So we have to do a fundamental breakdown and rebuilding of how we do things. And that's what DEI was trying to do, all these initiatives.
Yeah.
And we have ignorant people over here who claim that it's attacking white people. And it's not, and it's if you work hard over here and you're willing to do everything you can to be the best version of yourself, I think
Yeah.
regardless of what you look like, you should have those opportunities.
One question, non-related to the policies. Are
Mhm.
those hate groups still persistent in the southern states?
Now they're persistent in every state. It's not just the South, and that's kind of and it's not a wrong
Yeah.
assumption because they were founded in the South for most of them, and then they spread. But with like the
Well,
rise
they
of
wanted
technology.
to divide the country between, the
Oh yeah, yeah. That's
yeah,
definitely the slavery and anti-slavery ones. Yes,
yeah,
but since then, the hatefulness has spread like wildfire, and it's in all parts, unfortunately, of America. There are people in Kentucky that still have their prejudices and their biases against certain groups for no reason other than they were raised that way. They were taught that one set is better than another set with no evidence to prove it because you can't prove something that's false.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, unfortunately, that is prevalent. And shockingly enough, it seems to be gaining momentum as
yeah,
opposed to losing momentum. And that's a very unfortunate thing. I have two children, and my son's in America, he's going to be considered an adult in 4 years. He's 14. My daughter's 10, so she's a little bit longer. And what I tell people is, I'm afraid that the world that I'm going to hand them over and say, this is yours now, do with it as you will, is going to be
yeah,
so much worse than the one that I got years ago. And that one wasn't great, so we should be making progress and we should be doing
yeah,
better. And the past 10 years that Donald Trump has been in American politics has it's shot us in the foot. We are backtracking, and he's given a license to people to be as hateful, racist, and judgmental as they can. Now that that's seen as okay because our president does it. So if he's doing it, everyone should
yeah,
feel like they can.
yeah, and even some of these organizations and people are, they use the Bible and the excuse of Christian values when the
Yeah.
reality is that in the Bible you don't find any kind of that ideology.
No, so I like the fact that Jesus was a lot of things, and one of the things that he did in the Bible, whenever there were false prophets in the church, he went in there, threw the tables around, and I think went after them with a whip. That's my version of Christianity at this point. I want to be the guy going in, throwing the tables because I'm pissed off and chasing people with a whip when need be, because they are completely misusing religion in this
Yeah.
text to, you know, harm other people.
Well, the last question would be, what is your speaking of Donald Trump, what is your analysis of his second term in office?
I think that he is a man that feels like he has nothing to lose because he started getting prosecuted for his crimes and wrongdoings before he got his second term. I think he knew
Yeah.
that if he didn't run again, he would be actually held accountable for the first time in his life, and he didn't want that. And I think
Yeah.
that his only motivation for anything he does right now is perceived revenge against people who he thinks have done him wrong, even though they were just holding him to account for the first time.
Yeah.
And I think that if you have someone who's motivated strictly on those terms, you have a recipe for disaster, and that's what we have here. We have a president who, you know, invaded and tried to overthrow like the whole Venezuelan government. They allowed
Yeah.
the vice president to stay there because she was a little more favorable to Donald Trump, but he's trying to now take Greenland. He claims he single-handedly invaded and started a war with Iran, which in our country that requires Congress to approve, and he didn't do that. He doesn't care about the rules. He doesn't care about anyone other than himself. And as a result, we have one of the darkest times in our country's history, save, when we
Yeah.
first started and except for, the slavery period, which obviously there's no justification for that. You can never justify those acts. But a country that's been around for 250 years, that one that used to be seen as a beacon of hope and light for the world. We were
Yeah.
gifted the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor that has the poem on it that essentially says, bring us your weak, your weary, your huddled masses yearning to be free. Because other countries saw America as the one that would stand up against the wrongs, no matter where it was in the world, to ensure that other people were taken care of. And we had many
Yeah.
administrations who made mistakes along the way, but they always tried to uphold that belief. And now to see what we've become in the eyes of the world, how much we've fallen, um, it's very upsetting that one man in the 10 years that he's been in the political world, he can destroy a whole country's reputation so much. Um,
Yeah.
it's very disheartening for me. And again, that's one of the things I desperately am trying to fix because that's not who we are. That's not who so many Americans are. We do not reflect these values or lack thereof.
Yeah.
And we would do anything to help out anybody, regardless of where you come from, regardless of where you are right now. We'd give our shirts off our back to anybody in the world. That's just how most of us are raised and brought up. And to essentially be represented in the exact opposite way on the world stage is, it just really sucks.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for answering all my questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, have a nice day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.